Hey everybody, welcome to the Fired Up with CJ show. Today we are going to be talking to Margalis Fjelstad, and we're talking to her about her book, Stop Caretaking the Borderline or Narcissist, and how to end the drama and get on with life. That's a title. So welcome.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me on.
Now you're a family therapist, psychotherapist, is that right?
That's correct.
And how did you come upon this work?
Well, I worked with a lot of families over the years and found that some of them just seem to not get better and struggle for years and years. And I started studying those families. And the common denominator was usually someone in the family who had a personality disorder, especially narcissism or borderline.
Mm-hmm. Now, I think that with respect to narcissism, we kind of throw that term around a lot. Like, oh, he's such a narcissist. Yeah. And borderline is probably less common, but tell us what does it mean to be, let's start off with borderline, because I think that's probably less understood. It's called borderline personality disorder. Now, my husband said, what is it bordering? And I said, I don't know. I think schizophrenia and like other things like depression. I don't know.
Well, it is on the border of psychosis.
Mm-hmm.
Because sometimes a person with this disorder acts normally, and then sometimes they act totally irrationally and emotionally, and their thinking goes off kilter. Mm-hmm. So it's like they're on the border, they're not continuously psychotic, but sometimes they can act that way.
What does it mean to be psychotic?
It means you're out of touch with reality.
Oh, okay.
So that you can't be reasoned with, or you don't really understand what other people are saying or doing.
Yeah, okay. And how does one... Now, I was reading through your book and other things on the web, which is always dangerous when you're reading things on the web. It was saying that... it's what's the root cause of it? I mean, is it a nature nurture thing? Is it more genetic, or is it something that you were raised a particular way that kind of leaves you predisposed, or both?
Well, it really is both.
Uh-huh.
Some of the latest studies out of the Mayo Clinic suggest that borderline is about 50% inherited and about 50% nurture.
Okay.
Oftentimes, people with borderline tendencies are very intense emotionally. They have extremes of reactions to things, and if they have a difficult childhood, if they're abused, if they're abandoned, those injuries affect them much more strongly than they would a healthier child.
Okay, so if you had it genetically, there's 50% of the people have it genetically, and then there's certain kind of environmental situations, like you mentioned, that make you kind of predisposed. So if you had sexual abuse or physical abuse, and tell me and it was interesting because there's all these symptoms that actually these symptoms, and if you have 5 out of 9, a psychotherapist would call you borderline personality disorder. It's not something that I could just say I'm borderline. It's there's not a real clear definition, or is there?
There isn't a real clear definition for any mental disorder.
Okay, I didn't realize that. Okay.
It's always a how many symptoms does a person have, and how much does it interfere with their life.
Okay, and who deems what symptoms are, and if you're got 5 out of 9, like how does a psychotherapist, or do they just have a checklist? Like, do you have, are you highly sensitive? Check. Like, how does it work?
Right. Therapists go to what's called the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Illness, and it contains the checklists.
Okay.
And we do go down those checklists very carefully. But a lot of people don't meet all of those criteria for a disorder, but we would still see that they need help and support, maybe counseling, to deal with maybe they have 3 or 4 of the items, and it's causing them trouble in their life.
So if I were to come to someone like yourself and say, I don't know if I'm borderline or not, how does it work? So you have this checklist. Are you just reading off the checklist? Or, I mean, can I read off the checklist and say, oh, I need help, I need to go see Margalis? Like, how does it work?
Well, the thing about borderline and narcissism is people who have this disorder do not believe they have it.
No, that's a problem.
Everyone else has it.
Oh, they believe everyone else has it?
Yes.
Okay.
So it gets very confusing in a relationship because the person who's borderline or narcissist project their symptoms onto their partner. And their partner, if they're a caretaker, like I talk about in my book, they often absorb and say, oh, I must be that. And so then everybody gets totally confused.
That is very interesting. Okay, now what are the symptoms if, because your partner may be projecting and saying you're a borderline or narcissist and you're not sure now if you are or not. Tell us the symptoms for borderline personality disorder. What are some things that I would be looking for that are part of that checklist?
So intense, volatile emotions that change very rapidly, sometimes within minutes.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Really demanding and needy person who can't be alone at all.
Okay.
Chaotic, dramatic, paranoid kinds of behaviors and thoughts. Confused and distorted thinking. A lack of empathy. They can't really understand other people's feelings. And they also, we've just recently seen some studies, they can't read feelings on the person's face that they're talking to. So then they misperceive cues and respond in very odd ways so that the communication gets all jumbled up.
Okay, got it. Yeah. So, gosh, that could be almost anyone. It seems like that could be me on a bad day. So
yes, it could be you on a bad day, and that's one of the dilemmas. The thing about borderlines is them 10 times a day.
Oh, wow.
Not once in a while.
Okay.
Everybody can be that way once in a while.
Right.
But a borderline is consistently that way over and over. And then they switch from that kind of chaotic, emotional screaming and yelling and stomping around to being very calm and quiet and acting normal again. And that is terribly confusing.
Right, because then you think, well, it must be situational. It must have been those set of circumstances. So if you're with a partner who is someone who's a caretaker and who's like, what happened? Oh, it must have been these set of circumstances that led for that behavior. And there's no correlation, right? It's just at the moment they have, what is there something that causes that kind of emotional reaction, whatever it may be?
It appears to be primarily when the person with the disorder doesn't get their way.
So it's like a 2-year-old.
Well, that's actually what I say in my book. And I first worked with 2-year-olds about 25 years ago.
Yeah.
And they act very much the same. And one of the ways I explain it to my clients is the person with borderline is like they stopped emotional development at around age 2 or 3. And their intellectual development kept growing, and so it doesn't impact how smart they are, but it does impact how they emotionally react to things. So if it doesn't go their way, they just blow up.
Okay, so then that's a really dangerous formula, because if you're with someone like that, you always be like, oh no, they get their way. Oh no, you get your way, because you just don't want them to blow up. So you just give them, it's like a 2-year-old who you give them their way all the time, and then they become disastrously bad when they get to be older.
Well, that's exactly right. And caretakers are often people who don't like conflict, and they really give in to the other person a great deal. And actually, the relationship gets worse and worse, partly because of that.
Yeah, it's a dynamic. So, emotional instability. I'm reading from your book. How can stop caretaking the borderline or narcissist? How to end the drama and get on with life. So it's thought instability. So the thought instability book, and you're talking in behavioral instability and instability of a sense of self and relationship. So you talked about like you have to come here, you have to go away. It's like come here, I'm really needy, I need you now, and then the kind of have like a flare up maybe 10 times a day. What's the thought instability look like, and what's the behavioral instability about?
The thought instability is for the borderline, if I feel it, it must be true.
Oh, I see. So like you're saying, there's no rationally thinking like, well, how could that be true? If this is true and that's true, then that can't be true. They're just like, it's true. And you can't reason with them.
And very often their partner tries to be rational with them and explain, and that just makes them more mad.
I'm beginning to think I have people that I know that are borderline, or maybe because I'm projecting I am borderline. I'm not sure. Okay, and what's the behavioral instability part?
That's where they can be very calm, starting a conversation, and then suddenly be like through the roof angry within seconds.
Okay, all right. So I actually had, I'm a life coach, and I actually had a client who was like, oh my gosh, I need to see you. And then she talked to me and she was like, oh my God, that was fantastic. I really want to talk to you tomorrow, and call me. I want to sign up for whatever program. And then the next day she's like, I hate you. Why? You're the worst coach I've ever seen. And I was like, I was so confused because I had no idea what was happening. Is that an example?
That's it. That's exactly it.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Wow. Okay, got it. So, that's borderline personality disorder. How about someone I know that's like, oh, my girlfriend was borderline, and he said, well, sometimes she was incredibly charming. Like she was completely charming. She would, everyone would be fooled by her, how sweet she was, and she's very beautiful, so that she had this kind of alluring magnetism. And then she would kind of lure people in, and then the closer they came, the more then she would let loose, and kind of over time, this behavior would get kind of cuckoo crazy. Like she would get crazy.
Right.
Is that a borderline thing too? Because I didn't see that in your book, but I wasn't sure.
It very much could be. When you are at arm's length with somebody who has borderline or narcissism, they often look very normal, and you're not triggering any of their fears and anxieties. But as you get closer in a relationship and you now want something from them, then they start pushing you away. They get angry, they get frightened, they're really anxious at being emotionally close, and so they will flare up and push you away with the words they say or the anger in their voice.
Right.
That kind of thing.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. So you said that 50% is genetic. So is it a brain chemistry thing that's causing this? I can understand the nurture part where, you may actually have a sensitive person who has had sexual abuse or something, so that you don't have clear boundaries, you get angry, like you've had abuse that you haven't actually resolved. Mm. I get that part, but what's the genetic part? Is it a chemical thing, or what is it?
Well, according to the Mayo Clinic study, it's a malfunction in the amygdala. In the brain. The amygdala is kind of the grand central station of emotions. Mm-hmm. So our thoughts and emotions go through the amygdala and then come out as behaviors.
Ah, yes.
For the borderline, something happens in the amygdala so that they come out way too intense, or really connected to the thoughts or the words or the reality that's going on.
Oh, interesting. Okay. And then one of the other questions it seems is that when I was reading about it, so they're often related to other disorders like anxiety disorder, depression, bipolar. So how do they what's the cocktail that they get combined with?
Well, it can be any cocktail. Okay. Personality disorder is kind of its own category. But you could have other things going on like ADD or, like you said, bipolar.
Mm-hmm.
Those are considered different categories, so you can have both at the same time.
Wow.
The thing about borderline is their emotional volatility means that they are often anxious, they are often depressed, they oftentimes will see several therapists before they're accurately diagnosed.
Wow. Interesting. So that's why it's combined, because the root of it is the emotional, like they're wired in a particular way that makes them kind of more prone to stress, depression, all those kind of things bundled together. So that's why it could be several of these different things bundled together when you see them.
That's correct. Yes.
And are there meds that you can take? I mean, I was looking for therapies for bipolar disorder, or sorry, for borderline personality disorder, and I saw two mixed things. In your book, it was like, just live with it. This is kind of a condition that you have to live with. And then I saw someone from the National NAI that's like, this is something that you can solve through psychotherapy. And I don't know. What have you experienced as a person who's worked with people with this disorder?
Well, the answer to the medication thing, there isn't a particular medication.
Mm-hmm.
Very often people with this disorder are put on antidepressants, or sometimes they're put on medications like Effexor or Paxil, antidepressants that also reduce their anxiety and their reactivity.
Okay, got it.
That helps some, but there hasn't been any medication that really makes a significant difference.
And how does psychotherapy, or like there seemed like there were a whole bunch of different, when I was looking, a whole bunch of different kind of treatments that are out there for it. What's your sense about how they work?
Not very well.
Okay, well, that's sad.
Unfortunately. Dialectical behavioral therapy, which is DBT, focuses on helping the family and the person with the disorder work on changing the thought patterns.
Mm-hmm.
But the person with borderline disorder has to accept the fact that they have the disorder and be willing to work on it.
Right, which is number one problem, right? Because they don't think they even have a
That's
disorder.
problem. Yeah, because they really can't see that it's their problem at all most of the time. So unless they've been hospitalized, they very often don't believe that they are having this problem.
Right, so things have to be pretty bad before they even reach out to someone to help. And it seems like even when they do reach out to, I mean, the key part in therapy is you have to have someone who wants to participate. So if you don't have someone that believes that they even have a problem, there's your first issue. Okay, and tell us a little bit about, I was interested to see that narcissism is also like, it's kind of grouped together with this. Why is it grouped together with this, and what are the symptoms of narcissism?
Well, narcissism is much more, presents itself as attention seeking, as controlling, as manipulative, as superior, and what therapists call that is the false self. So this is a facade that a person has built over these borderline feelings and reactions.
Oh, I see.
And it may be a really strong facade, and that holds pretty well, but what happens when you get into an intimate relationship with a narcissist, these borderline reactions then start coming up. And it appears to often happen like the day after you get married.
Oh God, that's awful.
The day
that is awful.
People told me the very day after I got married, the person's personality changed entirely.
So it's close relationships then, right? It's not necessarily, if your friend had borderline, that's, I mean, because the marriage thing was just like, okay, now we're in a different category. I'm relying on you and don't try to control me and all these different things. Is that why the day after marriage it kind of snaps? Interesting. And I think it's really interesting. So it's narcissism, narcissist. To be different than the flower called Narcissus or whatever it is. Sorry, but what I think you're saying is that so you're saying it's a false self. So it's actually, these are kind of this false persona that I developed because I don't want to deal with the fact that I perhaps am borderline. Oops, and your video is turned off. Can you turn it back on? Oops, maybe my video got turned off. Are you there?
Yep, I'm here.
Okay, got it. All right, so let's talk about how these symptoms, so in terms of childhood to adult, because when I was looking on the website, it seems like they can't really diagnose someone until they're 18. Do you have to know, like, what's happening between 0 and 18 that you really don't know? And then you were saying, like, from 18 on, you may actually find that people in marriages, that's when things start changing. What's happening during the various time periods of a lifetime of someone who has
the disorder that is diagnosed oftentimes in childhood that is similar is called conduct disorder.
Oh, wow.
And conduct disorder is where a child is bullying, they're cruel to people, they can be nice one minute and then they punch somebody. They don't have the controls that adults do.
Okay.
So also fire setting, animal cruelty are often early signs of borderline possibilities in the future. Narcissists are more, as kids, bossy and entitled and demand that everybody play, in the playhouse. In preschool, they're telling everyone what to do, what part to play. But it's pretty hard to really tell.
Yeah, when they're young, because like a lot of kids are that way anyways, and they may not have. Okay, got it. So when they're 18, what happens that you can say, yep? Is it because their brain is fully baked that you're like, yeah, this now you can say?
Yeah. Well, the DSM manual that I mentioned just has a arbitrary line at 18. What you really see is that...
Yep, your video went off again. It's okay.
Yeah, I just turned it back on.
Thanks.
What you really see is difficult problems with relationships, especially friendships in the early adolescent years, often problems at school. So it's really hard because the brain changes so much from about age 12 until about actually age 22. So until you get into your 20s, it would be hard to diagnose a borderline before that, unless they are actively cutting or attempting suicide, because those are very likely adolescent behaviors that could be connected to borderline.
Okay, got it. So I never really understood cutting. What are they trying to do when they're cutting? What are people trying to do, kids trying to do when they're cutting themselves so that they can feel something? I mean, what is it that they're doing?
So they stop feeling something. It's a very interesting thing. Marshall Linehan, who's done a lot of research on this, says that when you cut, all your attention goes to the pain in your arm or leg, wherever you're cutting. And your emotional pain then kind of goes into the background.
Oh, so my God.
Cut when they're feeling emotionally distraught.
Right, because they don't want to feel the emotional. They would rather feel the physical pain of cutting themselves than the emotional pain that they're feeling. Oh, my God. That's so incredibly sad.
It is.
Okay. So those are the ways that you can tell if in the teen years. And then how about people at work, you're in your 20s, you're now in the workforce. How would you be able to tell if your boss is maybe someone who is either borderline personality or a narcissist?
Well, narcissist boss probably you won't notice because your relationship wouldn't be so close to them that they would be terribly triggered. But a borderline boss would be much more likely that their emotions, they're the bosses that come in and actually throw things at their employees or scream at them and pound on the table.
Okay.
Behaviors that really are totally inappropriate in the workplace.
Yes. Okay. So I actually coached a client who said his boss would come in and it's like, oh, he'd either complain about other people. Oh, so-and-so is such a jerk. And he'd be like, which was feeling really inappropriate for him to talk about his other work associates with, the boss was talking about the peers of this person and complaining and like going on and off. And then he would come in and like complain to him, oh, this piece of work is crap. I can't believe you think this is good. And he would go in from like highs and lows, but I thought that was bipolar, but it sounds like...
Bipolar and borderline are very difficult to tell apart.
Okay. Because they have highs and real strong peaks and lows. But is that right? I mean, does borderline have, like for people that I've met that are bipolar, they're on these highs where they're so good and they're magnetic and they're really happy and they're kind of like, woo, like that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then I see them the next day.
It doesn't happen for borderline.
What doesn't happen for borderline?
They don't have those highs typically.
Okay, got it. So
they will have the lows and the anger and the hostility, but they typically don't have those highs and those manias.
Okay. Now, is borderline something you grow out of? I mean, could one potentially, because I think I saw someplace on the web where it's like, well, when you get older, many people grow out of this. And I don't understand how that could happen.
I don't think they grow out of it. What happens is that they don't have as much energy in their body. As we get older, we don't have as much energy to yell and scream and stomp around.
Okay. So that's really just because you don't have enough fuel in your tank that you're not doing it?
Yeah.
Wait, is that...
Well, just as you get older, it's not... A person becomes more fearful of other people leaving the relationship.
Mm-hmm.
When you're young, you feel like you're in control of that. But as you get older and your kids don't want to put up with you anymore, then they don't call and they don't visit. And so the borderline can control their actions so that they can act more polite, especially for shorter periods of time.
Mm-hmm.
And then they can stay in contact with the people they care about. But as borderlines get older, if they don't make any kind of adjustments, they really end up being very alone because no one wants to be around them.
Yeah, I saw a very sad Facebook post from a friend of mine who said, it's Mother's Day, and sadly, I have a mother. I don't really have a mother that I can communicate with because, she kind of, whenever I see her, she yells at me and those kind of things. And so... it's very sad, I think. If you have a parent that's borderline, what's the best course of action? Because they're your parent. I mean, you want to be with them, but at the same time, they may actually have these behaviors that are really hard to swallow.
Right.
What does one do if you have a parent who may be borderline?
Well, you hopefully can find some things that you can do with them where they don't get frightened or anxious and activated, and they can do calm things with you. But typically what happens is you get in a discussion about differences of opinion, and that's when things blow up.
Okay, that could happen with my mom. I'm not sure she's borderline, but that could happen as well.
Yeah, this is the kind of blow up where the borderline says, I never want to see you again and you're out of my will. And
oh, no, okay.
Literally don't call you for several years.
The borderline person doesn't call for several years?
They might, or they might call the next week and be sweet as can be and not even remember that they had an argument with you.
Oh my gosh, okay, wow. What's the amnesia caused by?
Well, my theory is that when you are so emotionally activated, and this is true for all of us, we don't lay down our memories quite the same way.
Oh, right.
You know, when you've had a huge fight with somebody and your heart is racing and your blood pressure is up, you often don't remember what you said or did.
Yeah, that's what they say when you're drunk, right? When you're drunk, your amygdala goes kind of on a rampage. Well, that's something like that. So it kind of is a similar kind of thing where you're having kind of a raging moment and your amygdala is not functioning correct. You may not fully remember it because you're not even in your body probably at that point.
Right.
Wow, that's interesting. Okay, so if you have a parent, then it's basically managing the situations that you said to keep them calm. So that means so you just have to figure out what kind of things make them anxious and just stay away from those things?
Right. And they actually, borderlines kind of try and pull you into talking about those things. So you have to actively avoid them. Change the subject. Sometimes if they start on a roll, especially talking about one of your siblings and being angry, just say, I don't want to listen to this anymore. And if they keep it up, say, I'm going to need to hang up and let's talk again when you feel better.
Oh, interesting. So it's really about, you talk about really having boundaries is really important. And I love in the section on your book, we're talking to Margalis Fjelstad, and we're talking about her book, Stop Caretaking the Borderline or Narcissist and How to End the Drama. In your book, you actually have some really good techniques, I think, that are probably good whether you have a 2-year-old, a wayward teenager, someone who is not borderline, but it's just sometimes gets emotionally fried and you want to know what to do with them. And so one of the things that you talk about is setting boundaries as being really important. And I was wondering if we could role play some of these, because I think some of the times it's really hard to know what to do when you're in the moment, because, it's your parent, it's your husband, it's your child, they're having a moment, and, they're yelling at you. So I'm like, give me an example of something I may yell at you at if I'm a borderline. I know it sounds like almost anything, or let's say we're in the car and I'm like, you don't know how to drive. I don't know. What would a borderline say? You're the worst driver ever.
Yeah, or they might start screaming, stop, turn here.
Oh my God, I drove with someone like that. Oh no, you want to take a right here. The way I go is I actually take a right here and a left on Pike and blah, blah, blah. And that's the fastest way. So they're kind of trying to control everything.
Well, it's not just controlling, is that they're really getting emotional. And so I often suggest that you pull over to the side of the road and say, I really can't drive if you're yelling at me and yelling directions. I'm going to need you to just relax and be calm. And I will drive and I will promise that I will get us there. And then you take off again and give them another chance.
Okay, and then they're like, well, I know you just turned left, but really be faster going right.
And if you were driving, I would be willing for you to turn right, but I've decided to turn left.
Okay, so you don't give in to like, whatever, I'll just go back the way they want it.
No, you don't give in, but you also don't argue with them. You just say, I am doing this.
Right. Okay.
That's the wrong way.
Okay, so that's one of the things you say, take action, not discussion. It's like, we're not going to discuss this.
Right.
I'm just going to take a right and okay, there I go. Sorry. Okay, so I love this. You have this thing about, so let's say I'm yelling at you. What would I be yelling at you for? It could be anything like, stop, why are your shoes always on the floor? Why don't you put your shoes away? You're such a slob. Or, I don't know.
Actually, it typically is much more hostile than that.
Yeah.
It's name calling, cursing, smashing things on the wall, throwing things. So it's more escalated than that.
Okay. Or like, I hate all of you. You guys suck. Something like that.
And those are things that you just don't get talking about. You just say, I can't hear you when you're screaming at me, and I'd like to hear what you have to say. So I'll be back in 20 minutes and maybe we can talk about it.
Okay, because they don't want to be abandoned. I would be like, I'm out of here. Not come back.
Yeah, it's really helpful to give them a time frame.
Okay.
That you're going to check back.
Okay.
Just like you would a 2-year-old.
Yeah, it's not okay for you to yell at me. I will be back in 10 minutes. I will listen, but I can't listen right now when you're yelling at me. So goodbye. And you just, leave. I mean, I would probably say, like, when my kid was younger, I'd say, I love you, but I really, I need to leave now, honey. And I'll be back.
That would be very nice too. That would work very well.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
It's
then
a reassuring thing that can really help.
Okay, so then there's this example where this couple is arguing about, like, I don't want you to watch football with your friends at Sports Grill. I don't want you to enjoy the games, or like why do you have to always get together with your friends? So this is the kind of relationship part that you said, that people feel like, don't leave me. What and you say, take action, not discussion. Why not discuss things?
Because they're irrational.
Oh, you can't talk
to solve it.
Will they ever get
going to stubbornly stick to what they are feeling?
Oh, okay.
It actually escalates. They get more and more angry rather than
I get it. Okay, so if you're like, well, you don't understand, you get to see your friends and I see my friends as, like, they're just going to see, like, you're not, they'll get more emotionally revved up and then make things worse. So if you walk away, that allows them to calm down. And then when you come back, can you have a rational conversation, or kind of like it depends?
Sometimes you can have a rational conversation, but that doesn't guarantee that it will change it the next time.
Okay, God. So they may react exactly the same way even though you had a conversation about all of this. Wow.
Because they really don't know how to control that level of emotion.
Okay.
I explain it to the caretakers that a normal person would have, say, from 0 to 100. The normal person might have an emotion at 20.
Mm-hmm.
And the borderline is going to have an emotion at 100.
Oh,
so
I see.
5 times larger.
Oh, that's so sad. So they're really overwhelmed. They're really overwhelmed.
Yes.
Wow. And so
it's very, very difficult to control that level of emotion. And actually, they're being quiet and alone and not talking to people helps. But they're often afraid to be alone.
Oh, wow. That's a really interesting it's a hard combination, right? It's like, no, don't leave me. It's like, yeah, but you need to calm down. It's like, but then you're leaving me makes me not calm. So that's a hard one. Okay. You say be firm and also reassure. So it's like, well, how about if you don't go this time, or that kind of thing. So this is someone who's like, I have to go to a meeting, and the person maybe go, no, don't leave me, don't go to your meeting. Why don't you miss this meeting and come back later? I mean, what would you say in terms of firm and reassurance? What are they trying to do?
Well, they just don't want you to leave. So you say, I have to go to this meeting. It's a meeting for work. I'll be home by 9:30. And at 9:30, let's talk about our evening, or let's talk about what we're going to be doing tomorrow, or give them something to look forward to.
I see.
But don't give in.
Okay, because if you give in, then what does it do? It just reinforces.
You're reinforcing that the next time they think they'll just escalate and get worse because they won the last time. So now they're going to.
It's just like a 2-year-old. Wow, that's really interesting. So if it's because then they'll have to get even more, like, if it's not working and somehow you're not doing the things, then they'll have to just ramp it up a next notch. Oh my God. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. How about what's provocative behavior? So what made the provocative behavior be?
Well, being provocative is where they start accusing you of all kinds of horrible behaviors. You're having an affair. You're, I saw you flirting with so-and-so. Those are things that are really important not to get into a discussion about, because they just get worse and worse.
Okay.
So reassuring them, I love you. You're the person I'm with. I can't listen to any more of this talk because it's very upsetting to me, and I'm going to go and sit quietly in the other room, or I'm going to go bowling or whatever.
Okay. And it says use repetition. So it sounds like you're saying some of these things about like, I don't want to talk about this now. Is that because they may not be, if they're triggered emotionally, they may not hear it the first time, so you have to keep on repeating it?
Yeah.
Okay.
And the more you repeat it, the stronger you become in holding the boundary, because it's very easy to give in because they're so upset sometimes.
Right. And it's sad to see them upset. Okay, so we have some questions from the listeners. So one, so they were asking, is it like both bipolar? And you were saying, yes, it is. Except the difference is bipolar has kind of a happy feeling and they get kind of super elated, euphoric, and I think what you said is borderlines don't have that. Is that the only difference?
That's the main difference. I'm not a psychiatrist, so I don't know exactly the nuances of differences. I do know that there are medications for bipolar that really do help the highs and lows, and those same medications don't work for borderline.
Oh, that's interesting. So almost in some ways you prescribe the medication and see, and then you're like, oh, it worked. Well, you're bipolar.
Yeah,
okay.
That's the case.
Okay. And it says, what about if you can't process emotions? I don't know what that meant. I think it's, what about if you can't process emotions? So I think what that meant, and I actually thought about the same thing. It seems like there's some people who just don't have emotional maturity, so they could actually have the same kind of behaviors, and they're not borderline. They just aren't emotionally mature or intelligent. Is that possible?
Well, I don't know quite what that means.
I know people. I think I have. And this must mean that I'm borderline, but I think I know quite a few people who have this. And I think, well, they have, it's more like they can't control their emotions, but does that make them borderline if they can't control their emotions? It seems like a lot of people can't control their emotions.
Well, borderlines can't control their emotions really at all.
Oh, ever?
So if they have to learn consciously how to control their behaviors, but their emotions inside are still just as strong.
Oh, wow. So they develop compensating abilities to control things, but they can't keep a lid on it all the time. So they never really, so their emotions are always all over the place. It's just that sometimes they can control them and sometimes they can't.
And sometimes it appears that their emotions aren't causing them any trouble for a period of time.
Oh, interesting. Wow, okay.
It looks very random a lot of the time, but mostly their emotions get triggered when things don't go the way they expect.
Got it. Okay, and it looks like we may have a caller. I'm not sure if she's still there, but we'll wait to see if she's still calling Teresa. Okay, it looks like she's gone. So the other questions that folks on the line were asking is about multiple personality. So Beard said that one of the things in the book is that you said it's a borderline. It's like a borderline on psychosis or schizophrenia, which I assume is schizophrenia is multi-personality, right?
No, those are two different
Oh, okay. So they wanted to know about multi-personality. Do these things kind of come together? Could you be borderline? Could borderline personality disorder and multi-personality, could it just be that they have a different, they're kind of going into it? I don't even know what multi-personality is.
Sometimes people will describe their partner as like a Jekyll and Hyde.
Ah, okay.
And that could look like multiple personality disorder, but the person is still there. It's not like they leave their body and become somebody else. They just respond differently.
Right. The Jekyll and Hyde feels like a multiple personality, but it's really just you're calm, you're able to emotionally regulate, and you can't. Yeah. Whereas multiple personality, what happens? Do they literally take on a different persona?
Right. They may take on a persona and be 5 years old, or have no memories of the third grade. It's a very complex thing, and multiple personality disorder seems to be the result of massive sexual abuse.
Oh, that's sad. Okay. So, and then someone asked, what if you have a brain swelling in that area of the brain? Could that cause a brief change in the situation and maybe cause these kind of disorders? Because if it's I think what they're saying is if it's amygdala related thing, then could it be that that could happen? That if your brain was swelling in that area, could it cause these kind of inabilities to regulate?
I have no idea. I don't have any background in brain swellings.
Right. Okay. So the last question would be, tell us a little bit about the relationship. We have a couple minutes left, but tell us about the relationship why do borderline and narcissist folks seek out the caretaker? Are they in the hunt for the caretaker, or how does this whole thing emerge?
Well, I don't know if they're on the hunt, but they certainly find caretakers to be a good match for them, because caretakers don't like conflict. They give in easily. They're really adaptable. If the borderline narcissist says, no, I want it this way, the caretaker type person is much more likely to give in and not make a fuss. Caretakers tend to be really adaptable, loyal. They really take on the projections and work hard to try and fix the borderline or the narcissist. And they don't give up on the relationship. A non-caretaker kind of person is much more likely to, like the second date, say, I don't want to put up with this. I'm not interested.
Yeah, you're too much for me.
Yeah.
I think they call it a hot mess now. You're a hot mess. I'm out of here. All right, we've been talking about stop caretaking the borderline or narcissist and how to end the drama. And I think if this sounded familiar to you, like, yeah, I actually think that a lot of the strategies in here and some of the there's a triangle that you talk about that kind of creates this whole dynamic and the various roles that you play. Very interesting, because I think that it's really sad for the people that have this disorder, I think, to actually always be emotionally fragile. But it also must be really hard for the caretakers, especially if it's like we were talking about, it's your child or you actually have a parent who has this disorder. So what a great resource. Thank you so much for being here.
I appreciate your having me on.
All right. Tell us your website, folks, and you have a newsletter too. Tell us all your info.
My website is margallistherapy.com. That's MARGALIS therapy.com. And you can sign up there, send me an email, and I'll put you on my free newsletter mailing list.
And so these are for caretakers, people who have someone who is borderline or narcissist, and they need to actually get some help.
And I also do individual phone consults with people. And within the next couple months, I'm going to have an online course for caretakers using the information from my book.
Oh, that's great. Cool. Okay. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you, listening audience. Thanks for all those great questions. Have a great weekend, everyone. And thank you, Rebel. It means so much to me that you're listening to the show. I would love your support in any way by giving me comments below, or to subscribe to the show or share the show with friends. Thank you again for your support. Love and blessings.